Good morning, Year 10. As promised yesterday, I am here again to talk to you a little bit about the um, next part of the course that you need to be looking at, and something that you need to know about definitely, because it's one of the most important things that happened in the 20th century, but also one of the most important things for your course, and that thing is the Treaty of Versailles. You need to know what the Treaty of Versailles was, why the Treaty of Versailles is important, and most importantly, you need to know the impact of the Treaty of Versailles, because the Treaty of Versailles is mainly the reason why we end up with pretty much everything that happens in Germany through this time, because it's a very, very divisive document. What I mean by that is lots of people are divided over whether it was necessary, when it should have happened, whether it went too far, whether it didn't go far enough, and why it let Germany get to the point where they put someone like Hitler in charge. Now, I know you've already done a little bit of work on the Treaty of Versailles in Year 9, and it's a bit of a recap on that work as well to ensure that you know exactly what it is and exactly why it's important and exactly what the impact of it is, because it is that important. So the task on the first page here, describe what Germany was like after World War One, is the recap of the last lesson. The stuff that you were talking about for that 8-mark answer that hopefully you will write, that is a recap to that. You need to know what Germany was like, because then it tells you why the Treaty of Versailles was such an important thing. So that's why that's the recap there. So, Treaty of Versailles. It's worth remembering when it was signed. It was signed on the 28th of June 1919, and it was signed by the big three, who were the Allied three, so Lloyd George of Britain, Clemenceau of France, and Wilson of America. And those three people were the three people that were most involved with writing what happened in the Treaty of Versailles. Germany, crucially, did not get a say at all on the treaty, and they were forced to sign it. So they didn't even get to change any of it or change the things that were particularly bad for Germany, and that's crucial because that kind of tells you why it's important later on. And it's important to know why the Treaty of Versailles was signed. You've just come out of one of the worst world conflicts in history. It's killed the most people in history, and it's led to one of the biggest global pandemics that we've had for hundreds of years, which was the Spanish flu pandemic. So you've got three different things that have really, really impacted on the way that people are feeling and what people are doing in Germany at the time. And the main things that the Treaty of Versailles set out to do was to try and prevent anything like World War One happening again. And France, especially because of its geographical location, which is completely right next to Germany, were really, really harsh and tried to put in terms that would absolutely kind of decimate Germany, would mean that Germany have no real impact on the world. And so they tried to hit them in the pocket, they tried to hit them financially with money, they tried to hit them with the amount of army that they could have, the amount of navy, because remember, you've looked at the navy laws, one of the big things on the run up to World War One was the increase in the navy that the Kaiser was doing. France wanted that to not happen again. And crucially as well, we are now getting planes and aircraft that can help in wars, and so they wanted to avoid the Air Force becoming a thing as well. So that's France went into the meetings, into the meetings with the big three, to try and prevent Germany from becoming strong again. Try and prevent them from becoming a world power again. America, on the other hand, went into the debates and discussions thinking that actually they need to help Germany become a much more American style, English style country and allow them to have a place on the world stage to make them feel involved in the world and to stop that anti-world feeling that had happened before World War One. And so President Wilson went into the discussions trying to get everybody to sit together and not be too hard on Germany. And Britain was kind of in the middle, as we always are. So the Germans were expecting, they weren't sure. They knew that the Allies would want Germany to become a stable country, but they also felt that all countries should bear equal blame for the First World War. They shouldn't be the only country to blame. But unfortunately, when you're on the losing side, I'm sure you've all heard the term or the very famous quote, the victors write history. And that means that basically Germany were completely blamed for what happened in World War One. President Wilson of the USA believed that the treaty should not be too harsh in case one day Germany sought revenge. Okay, bit of foreshadowing there. A bit of, if that was done in a film, you'd go, "Oh, that's awful. That's a really, really bad film stereotype where someone foreshadows what's going to happen." But this is real life. Like, President Wilson did think that Germany would retaliate if it was too harsh, which we know eventually did happen. And Friedrich Ebert was the leader of the Social Democrats. He became president of the Weimar Republic in 1919. He was the main person that Germany had who would have been held responsible for the Treaty of Versailles. As I said, they didn't really have a say in what the treaty was, but he was the person that was in charge of Germany at the time. Now, here we have most of the articles of the Treaty of Versailles. These are the important ones. These are the ones that you kind of need to know. So, 1 to 26 at the top here. I've lost my mouse. Oh, it's not working. Here we go. Here it is. So 1 to 26 at the top. The Covenant of the League of Nations. Germany was not allowed to join. So the League of Nations, if you know what the UN is now, it's where all the countries get together, they have meetings, they decide on how the world, the UN, is going to react to certain issues that go on across the world. For example, a couple of years ago, Russia invaded Ukraine and took part of the Crimean part of Ukraine and made it Russia. And the UN got together, talked about it, said that it was an awful thing for Russia to be doing. They should never do that kind of thing, but we're not going to do anything. And Russia, essentially, they were hit in the pocket. They had some trade bans with some countries, but generally the UN got together and they held world peace. They stopped countries from retaliating against Russia, and it was left on its own. Now, the League of Nations, because that was only 2 years ago, the League of Nations, 100 and however many years ago now, was set up to do exactly the same thing. It was there so countries could talk to each other instead of just going to war. But Germany wasn't allowed to join. And remember, Germany was one of the countries, was one of the main countries that declared war at the beginning of the First World War on the countries that were allied with Serbia. And if you've got Germany at that table, they're less likely to do that in the future. So that's a big misstep already. Article 42, the Rhineland was demilitarized. The German army was not allowed to go there. Now, the Rhineland is the part of Germany that is right next to France. And it's very, very, very rich. It's got most of the German industrial power there, most of the factories, most of the good ground for agriculture, for farming, and so Germany makes a lot of money out of the Rhineland. But Germany weren't allowed to station their army there. We're going to talk about issues in the Rhineland in a future lesson, because eventually the French took control of the Rhineland because there's no resistance, there's no army holding it, and they took control of the Rhineland and took all that money off Germany, which plunged Germany into a massive economic crisis. So again, you've got a part of Germany, the richest part of Germany, and Germany isn't allowed to defend it. That's the key. That's the key thing. The Saar, with the rich coalfields, was also given to France for 15 years. Now, this is part of the repayment for the war that Germany had to pay. And coal at this time was a massive, massive commodity, something that every country wanted. And if you give up your coal supplies, you are weakening your country itself. It's a really, really big issue. And so, if Germany is giving up its coal supplies, they're not making as much money, and the money, which we'll come to, that they're going to have to pay, is going to be harder to repay, and so the German economy is going to get absolutely wrecked. And if the German economy gets wrecked, it leads to unemployment, and issues happen to the point where you end up with someone like Adolf Hitler. Again, massive foreshadowing. But we're still in 1919, don't forget. I'm just trying to paint a picture of why some of these are bad. Alsace-Lorraine was returned to France. Again, another part of the country given back to France. Not particularly strategic, or not got a lot of industry there. But again, Germany's losing parts of its country. That's not going to look good. Germany is not allowed to unite with Austria. Obviously, Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand was from there. He was shot. That's why Germany entered the war. So they were forbidden to sign treaties with Austria and forbidden to stick with them. Lands in eastern Germany, so the other side, not the side that France is on, but the other side of Germany, were given to Poland. The rich farmers of Posen and the Polish corridor between Germany and East Prussia is given to Poland. Okay, so again, Germany's losing parts of its country, very rich farmland, they're losing that to another country. Doesn't look great. Danzig's made a free city under the League of Nations control, so they lose a city. It's made free. A free city is a country that's not connected to any. It's a city that's not connected to any other country. Okay, so they become their own. They have their own governors. They have their own government. They can make their own decisions, and they don't have to pay taxes or anything to another state. They are on their own. And so again, Germany loses a city that's making a lot of money. The German army is restricted to 100,000 men. Okay, which let me tell you is almost nothing. If you think about the Battle of the Somme in World War I, Britain and the British Empire lost 60,000 men in one day. 100,000 men for a whole entire army is not a lot of people. The German Navy is restricted to 6 battleships and no submarines. Again, Navy was a big thing for the Kaiser. You're restricting that, stopping them from having almost anything. And they're not allowed to have an air force at all. Germany is responsible for causing all the loss and damage caused by the war. That's a mental attack on Germany. If you're telling them that they're at fault, they are not going to be happy about that. And also, crucially, last one, Germany would have to pay reparations to be decided later. And it was eventually set at 132 billion gold marks. Okay, that is an absolute massive amount of money. If I put that into British money, just so you've got an idea, it is about $400 billion, or 6 points. Oh no, it's even more than that. About 200 billion pounds. A lot of money. That's nowadays money. So you imagine that kind of money that Germany has to pay other countries just because they went to war with them. Now, what I would suggest you do is you have an idea of what happened in the Treaty of Versailles and what the things were, and I think you need to highlight the ones in the treaty that link to whether it's territorial, whether it's to do with how much land a country's got, whether it's military, or whether it's financial. And I would like you to say what you think the short-term and the long-term impact of these will be. I've gone through a few of them for you. I've talked you through a lot of them, so that should be relatively easy. Then we've got 3 sources here. Well, there's actually 4 sources here. I would like you to have a look at these sources, and I would like you to tell me what the German reaction to the Treaty of Versailles is. What do the Germans think about the Treaty of Versailles, and why might that cause issues in the future? That's another question I think you should be answering in your own notes. And then there is a couple of 4-mark exam questions. Now, I know yesterday I encouraged you to do an 8-mark exam question, so this is not compulsory. You don't have to do it, but I would suggest doing it. I think it would be a good idea. And again, if you do it and you want to send it me, I will mark it for you. That is absolutely fine. And I think, yeah, we'll not do that one. I think that's it. Again, all of that stuff is found on the VLE. Okay, if you go to lesson 5, it is all in there, and there's some information from the textbook that you can read through as well to help you with that information too. I think that's the right one. Let me just check. Yeah, so you can find all of that in lesson 5 on the VLE. I hope that's been useful for you, year 10, and I hope that a lot of that was sorted out. I'm not going to do another video this week because it's Friday tomorrow, so I will I will do another video for you next week with a new topic talking about the political issues in Germany at the time. So I hope you find this useful. Please stay safe and have a good weekend when we get there if you can.